Over 200,000 square kilometers of Zambian forest is a game management area. However, there is less that is being done to conserve these game management areas. On this week's edition of Your Platform, a program that gives you an opportunity to air views on things that are affecting you, we are going to focus our attention on wildlife conservation. I am your host for this week, Macpherson Mukuka. Stay tuned. Right now, I'm joined by Mr. Sport Beatty, who is Game Rangers International Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Beatty, welcome to your platform.
Thanks, Macpherson.
For starters, what is Game Rangers International?
Okay, GRI is a locally registered non-profit organisation that works in close partnership with the Department of National Parks, formerly ZAWA, and also the local communities to try and support the men and women who are on the front line of conservation. So our main objective is to provide welfare, training and operational support to rangers who are looking after the animals. So although we're trying to look after the animals, we're mostly focused on supporting the people that look after the animals and also working very closely with local communities who are the beneficiaries, who should be the beneficiaries of conservation. Yeah.
How do you look at wildlife conservation in Zambia?
I think wildlife conservation in Zambia is a very exciting field. I think there's lots of opportunity that is not being tapped into, but there's also a lot of need, and I think that's where our role comes in to try and work alongside government agencies, so Forestry Department, Department of National Parks, and as I said, the local communities, to try and really help Zambia recognize and realize the value from wildlife that it can generate for the country as a whole.
Do you think the current policies in wildlife and tourism conservation to ensure that these animals are protected?
Yeah, I think from a protection point of view, Macpherson, the policy is there. I think there's always room to strengthen policy at any level, in any climate or landscape. So right now, though, the policy that there is strong enough. It allows us to support Department of National Parks to do their jobs, to ensure that law enforcement is being done and that the rule of law is being upheld and that people are benefiting. So for now it works, but I think as things change, we're living in an environment where if things don't pay, they don't stay. That's what I always say. So we have to find new policies that enable all of us and local Zambians to really benefit from wildlife.
Let's look at the aspect of poaching in our game management areas. How do you come in and to ensure that you protect animals?
Okay, so first of all, the responsibility of protecting the wildlife rests with the Department of National Parks. When it comes to the game management areas, that responsibility is also afforded to the Community Resources Boards, the CRBs, who employ local community scouts who patrol those game management areas. Where we come in, our agreement with government is that they provide the manpower and they pay the salaries and we pay the rest. So I often use the example, we're like the batteries inside the torch. You don't really see us, you don't have to feel us, but we're inside the torch, helping the light to come on.
As an international organization, how has Zambia performed globally with regards to wildlife conservation?
I think Zambia can be very proud and hold its head high as a leading example of good conservation practices. Obviously there's room and space to do more, as there is all over the place. But I think Zambia is doing a good job. There's still a lot of work that we have to do. And the more we do, I think the better it will become and the more people will benefit.
How do you go on the ground to ensure that you educate the local community that are entrusted with the task of ensuring that animals are protected?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because unless the local communities really get some tangible benefits, and I'm talking about money in the pocket, not just roads and clinics and things, but really each member of the community should be realizing some tangible benefit from wildlife. That would be first prize, where we would love to see Zambia reaching. So what we do toward that extent is we work very closely with the local communities, especially around Kafue National Park, that are living contiguous to the protected area, and to help them really understand and appreciate the value of wildlife. And we do that at two different levels, if you like. We work in the schools, so we're supporting at the moment 40 schools, and providing conservation awareness as an after-school activity to all the children. That's the Chongololo Club, and just really getting kids excited because they are the future.
Protecting biodiversity and habitat is a shared responsibility of all of us, natural heritage of mankind. We also could call it a spiritual dimension when we replace natural heritage by God's creation, since we're living here in a Christian country. It has a criminal dimension when we talk about poaching, illegal deforestation, illegal settlements. So we are all stakeholders in a certain way. I would like to thank Karen Lawrenson for reminding us that there are many reasons to celebrate here in the country also. And you have pointed out and emphasized peace and stability. So we all have to be very alarmed by all this news about the increase of political violence here in the country. This is news which travels very fast to Europe and to the United States. And we have already gotten the first questions from our ministry in Berlin if we have to change the travel alerts for Zambia. And that would have an immediate impact on tourism and investment here in the country. So all those who embark and engage in political violence must know that they really harm Zambia's excellent reputation so far of being a peaceful country and a place worth to go to. I've been here in the country now for 4 years, and there's no shortage, I would say, of sound analysis and seminars and conferences, but what we lack is concrete action on the ground.
You're still watching your platform, a program that gives you an opportunity to air views on things that are affecting you. And we continue discussing wildlife conservation. This time around, I'm joined by Nambula Kachumi, who is Executive Director for We Create Zambia. Mrs. Kachumi, welcome to your platform.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
What is We Create Zambia?
Okay, so We Create is basically the Women's Entrepreneurial Center of Resources, which has been designed to offer various business resources and tools for women entrepreneurs. We're working with women in various sectors. And the idea is actually to ensure that women do actually have an opportunity to access different resources, including training, mentorship. We have a very mentor-focused programs that we create, and also an opportunity to have access to different business linkages, including options for financing, access to market, and to basically just come to the center and get connected so that they're able to scale and to grow their business.
It has come out that women are part of the chain that helps distribute game meat, as it were. How do you come in, and what is your role as a women organization to help these women and tell them on the dangers of being part of this chain of distribution of game meat?
Okay. As a center, I feel that it's absolutely important that women actually are aware that there's a lot of other things that they can do within the wildlife conservation area, within the supply chain as well, for them to become legal participants in these economic activities. So it's also worth noting that as a center, we'll be opening a satellite center within the tourism and wildlife sector to ensure that we engage women and help them see this as a business that they can engage in, and also to contribute to helping to conserve the wildlife is quite very, very important. But one other issue also which is important is family participation, because I think if we have to inculcate a culture where people begin to see, wildlife as something valuable, it's important to engage the whole community, and women are very active participants within their communities. So we want to be able to use them as agents of change. We want them to be champions for wildlife conservation, and also to ensure that these are lessons that are passed on also to the children. And that is why as a center we want to be able to promote tourism and wildlife conservation for women to participate not only in the lower supply chain sort of arrangement, but even in the higher one. We want to see more women safari operators. First of all, want to be able to see them engage in partnerships, that will ensure that they have equity arrangements in the wildlife conservation and tourism.
How often are you on the ground to engage these organizations that work in game management areas to ensure that, of course, you have these numbers of women that you wish to see?
Okay. First of all, I think amongst the women entrepreneurs that we're targeting, we're looking at really growing the startup community within the tourism and wildlife conservation sector. And by this, what I mean is really having a very broad approach in terms of how they can engage. And by doing so, we are allowing women entrepreneurs to participate in our programs such as the Startup Academy, which is a 15-week program, and it actually looks at the various stages of setting up and operating a business. So for us, opening a satellite center that will basically just focus on tourism and wildlife conservation gives us an opportunity to really engage with the stakeholders from the low level to the very higher level, such as government and other partners engaged in this sector. And part of the role that we see as We Create playing is the sort of convening role, to see some sort of needs assessment, which area of the sector or the supply chain is more has got high potential impact on women startups, for example, because when we look at tourism and wildlife conservation, we want to look at the big multinational corporations that are going to come and invest. We want to look at foreign investment, but I think the local market now is opening up to engaging or investing more in wildlife conservation and tourism. So I feel personally that this is a good entry point for entrepreneurship and innovation, and also it's important to continue encouraging participation, because you cannot really isolate tourism from the economy. It's directly linked, and we know that the sector has got the potential to really contribute to the national GDP. So I think it's high time that we started looking at growing that enterprise, the private enterprise, which is locally driven more than it is foreign driven. This is the only way we'll be able to see those jobs be created in the economy. This is the only way we're going to be able to see a huge contribution towards the economy. We need to look at the local market and how the local people can participate, women inclusive.
I would like to see comprehensive general management plans for each and every protected area in Zambia, be it a game management area or a national park, where a scientific inventory of the resource is taken, and the tourism activity planned based on that, where each area will sustain itself through that activity, where the surrounding communities will be taken into consideration and given an active role in that, at least where possible. I think that's the future for protecting and wildlife and promoting tourism in those remote wild areas. Strong management planning and then their implementation and enforcement. The economic one, we've heard a few times mentioned that Zambia is an expensive place. The tourist in Zambia is one of the most highly taxed creatures I know of. 10% service charge, 16% VAT. A lot of our neighbouring countries don't charge that. That renders us uncompetitive before we get out of bed. I'd like to see tourism, so you mentioned that we're a non-traditional exporter. I'd like to see that status formalized like agriculture. Let's see incentives and taxation for tourism along the same lines as agriculture. That will encourage investment, particularly in areas if we're going to go and open them up. So there we go. Look after the animals, look after your investors. Thank you.
You're still watching Your Platform, a program that gives you an opportunity to air views on things that are affecting you as a community. This time around, we are joined by Dr. Victor Siamudala, who is Director of the Nature Conservancy. Dr. Siamudala, welcome to Your Platform.
Thank you very much.
This time around, we are looking at wildlife conservation. But for starters, what is the Nature Conservancy?
Well, the Nature Conservancy is a leading international conservation organization that is operating in about 33 countries in the world. We have programs in various continents, and in Africa we have 4 country programs, one in Gabon, we have presence in Kenya, and in Tanzania, and also in Zambia. In Zambia, basically, we are working with various partners, government, communities, and private sector to see how we can create the enabling conditions for both conservation and the development of the tourism industry. But at the end of the day, would also to see how communities that live with wildlife can benefit from the resource.
The tourism industry in Zambia is coupled with a number of things, and wildlife is among those that most tourists would want to come and see. But from the Nature Conservancy point of view, how are we doing with regards to wildlife conservation?
Well, I think in terms of wildlife conservation, we would like to applaud government's effort that they are putting in to secure the wildlife estate. But we are aware that the landscape is very vast that has been dedicated to wildlife, and it comes with its own challenges, particularly around sustainable financing for protected areas. And I think this is one of the areas that we are working closely with government, hopefully that we can be able, through government's support, we see enabling conditions put in place that will allow for more financing to come into the sector from cooperating partners, but at the end of the day that we can see most of these protected areas to begin generating money that can go towards management of the protected areas themselves, because it's one thing to receive money from cooperating partners, but the asset that we are looking after must also start generating money. I think the potential is there. Some parks have demonstrated that you can generate money, but I think we still have to invest more in most parks for them to reach that level where they can become tourist destinations, where we can have more private sector investment come into this area, and also to market our national parks and game management areas to the tourists, both local and international, but also to mobilize private sector investment. Some of these areas don't have the investment that is needed.
Out of the over 200,000 square meters, kilometers
yes,
of the game management area that Zambia has,
yes,
how are we doing in terms of ensuring that this area is protected?
Well, I think we giving, as TNC, we are giving support to government. For instance, our flagship project area in Zambia is the Kafue landscape. So what we are doing is we are providing money to government to to manage the Kafue National Park in terms of law enforcement. We provide that support. Last year we helped government to train about 60 officers for anti-poaching. We provide money to one of our partners, who is the Game Rangers International in Kafue National Park, for law enforcement. We've bought equipment like motorized boat for lakeshore patrols around Lake Iteji. And then we work with communities as well. For instance, in Mulobezi Game Management Area, we provide support to the community village scouts for resource protection, and we've provided for infrastructure in terms of office space and staff housing, both in the park and in the GMAs. So that's part of our investment that we're doing in terms of capacity building, but we're also looking at developing new models of how we can manage this game management area so that they become viable both in terms of the ecosystem, in terms of the ecological integrity, but also in terms of income generation. We would like to see a situation where these communities are more empowered in terms of resource ownership. They must have more tenure rights around wildlife, but also to have a bigger stake in terms of the wildlife enterprises that are in these GMAs. So we'd like to see how we can create businesses that are wholly owned by communities, and probably then they can just partner with the private sector to help them on the management side of the business. So we are scoping for such kind of opportunities in the GMA areas within Kafue, like Mulobezi and others, and we hope from there we can build models that we can replicate within the rest of the Kafue landscape, but also maybe in other areas such as the South Luangwa area. So those are some of the things that we're doing, and certainly we have challenges here and there, but I think with the kind of support we are seeing from government, we should be able to get these things out to showcase to the rest of the country maybe in the next 3 to 5 years.
In a third world nation and also a developing country such as Zambia, economic activities such as mining have threatened wildlife conservation. As TNC, how best can we protect this wildlife with regards to avoiding such activities taking place in game management areas?
Well, you are right that other land use activities do pose a threat to conservation of not only wildlife but other natural resources such as forestry and fisheries. I'm glad to inform you that we are working with government through the Ministry of Lands, Environment and Natural Resources and Environmental Protection, trying to see how we can harmonize the needs of development from these other sectors with that of nature conservation. And we're working with them on a science program that we call Smart Planning. And this framework helps government to be able to ask questions of development in relation to nature and say where should they place their development without jeopardizing the ecological services that come from nature, because these ecological services are critical even for our industrialization program in Zambia. We need fresh water for industry and for people. We need water to generate hydropower energy. We need forest reserves to help us to impact the negative effects of climate change. So we have this tool that we are working on with government through the Ministry of Lands, and we hope from the kind of work we are doing, probably by the end of the year we may have a conservation blueprint for the country and relate it to the other sector developments. From there we may then be able to come up with guidelines as a country on how then we should be able to place our developments. Where do we direct our developments so that we steer them away from ecologically sensitive areas?
Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time.
You're welcome.
You're still watching Your Platform, a program that gives you an opportunity as members of the public to air views on things that are affecting you. We are now at the American Embassy, where a special panel discussion is taking place. Let us listen to American Ambassador to Zambia, Eric Shoes, on his view on wildlife management in Zambia.
You really won't have a tourism industry in Zambia if you don't conserve the wildlife. That's what people come here to see.
yeah, okay, they come for Victoria Falls as well, but it's really, it's about the wildlife. Zambia's wildlife's been hit pretty hard, as is true of many of the countries in Africa, by poaching. So, you know, our focus has been on what we can do to sort of help Zambia combat poaching and to preserve its wildlife. You all know that if poaching continues at its current rate, the elephant and rhino populations in Africa will be extinct within a matter of a few decades. But there's actually, you know, another form of poaching which is a problem as well, which is bushmeat poaching, which is actually driven more by local demand. You know, the demand for tusks and horns comes primarily from East Asia, but there is actually a problem with poaching that's directed at game, at bushmeat. So, you know, we've laid out some ideas in various opinion pieces and whatnot about how we think this could be tackled. One of the things is that, you know, so we would see photographic safari tourism as kind of a key part of the answer, because it's the part of the industry that can generate the most jobs, and it sort of makes use of the animals as a renewable resource. It invests them with economic value that far exceeds, frankly, what hunting invests them with. You know, there's the famous case of Cecil the lion in Zimbabwe, and if you followed that, you'll know that the license, you know, only cost a few $1,000s. That the professional hunter who conducted the, you know, the hunt made tens of thousands of dollars. But the lion himself, you know, was worth millions to the photographic safari industry in Zambia. There are studies that show that over the span of his lifetime, an average of a lion, not someone as special and well known as Cecil, is worth over $2 million to the photographic safari industry. Elephants are worth over $1 million. So it's kind of, you know, an economic argument about why you need to preserve the animals in order to maximize your photographic safari industry. I think that hunting has a place in this. We wouldn't argue that against hunting, but we would argue that hunting has to be based on good science. It has to be sustainable and responsible over time. And then, you know, there's sort of a third component that we've talked about, which is relates to the bush meat poaching, and that's the game ranching industry. So in South Africa, for instance, that's become a pretty major industry, and there's no particular reason why that couldn't be the case in Zambia. And that would relieve some of the pressure on poaching for bushmeat, because the you know, kudu, something like that, would be available in the grocery store potentially. Then the last thing that I want to really talk about is kind of U.S. policy on this. A couple of years ago, President Obama identified wildlife trafficking as a national security priority for the United States. And since then, we've tried to increase our attention to this, increase the resources that we're putting toward it. Our view of this is that it's very much like any other form of trafficking, but especially sort of like narcotics trafficking, where you know, you have the demand is driven by other countries other than the suppliers. So in the case of narcotics, the demand was really driven. It has been driven by the United States, by Europe. In the case of wildlife trafficking, it's mostly in the East. But you know, when you're faced with a problem like this, you have to address both sides of the equation. So we're doing things to try to reduce demand over time, and that's really sort of a question of education and of you know, kind of social development in the Orient, kind of a recognition, if you will, that that there might be a better way to cure. I don't know what's the correct form to use. Let's just say that Viagra is probably better than rhino horn, and when people sort of figure that out and realize that it's a hell of a lot cheaper, that ought to reduce demand quite a bit, I would think. You know, so that's the demand side. On the supply side, we are trying to work with rangers, with military throughout the world to increase their ability to interdict traffickers and to prevent poaching from occurring. And here in Zambia, we've done a bit of that. We'd like to do more, frankly, but right now we have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which has contributed $200,000 in the last year of its African elephant funds to projects here in Zambia. Another $350,000 in African rhino funds, which have gone to projects in Zambia. AID, the Agency for International Development, led by the very capable Anatonis when it comes to these issues, is starting up a couple of projects directed at, I guess it's NPW now, not ZAWA, but we're to help them sort of improve their ability to detect poaching. And also we're contributing money to North Luangwa, along with the German government, to the Rhino project up there. We're also providing training to the Zambian government through the International Law Enforcement Academy in Gaborone. I only know it as ILEA, so I'm not quite sure what the acronym stands for anymore. And then, frankly, the last thing I'd say is we're trying to raise awareness and sort of raise, the profile of this issue here in Zambia, through events like this, through articles that we've written, and through our engagement with the government and other stakeholders. And so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Let us now join Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and Arts, Mr. Stephen Mwansa, as he gives his view on wildlife management in Zambia.
1/3 of Zambia, to be exact, 231,000 square kilometers out of the 752,600 square kilometers is a protected area. Now, in order to protect that area, you need more than just the ministry in terms of Department of National Parks and Wildlife. We need every other stakeholder involved. And if we don't get it done right, posterity will judge us very harshly. And 50 years from now, children will be asking, what is an elephant? Or it looks like this. Where can I find one? In captivity somewhere. Because there'll be no elephants here, no lions. And we almost came very close to having no rhinos at all. And we are on a very slow build-up, but efforts are being made, and I must pay gratitude, express gratitude to all those that have worked to ensure that we also have now rhinos called Rhino Piri, Rhino Zulu, Rhino Banda in North Luangwa, and also Rhino Hamsankwa in Livingstone. And there is also, I would say, yes, they're not free roaming, the two that we have in Lusaka National Park, but we started off, we're getting somewhere. Together with the primary legislation, which is the Zambia Wildlife Act of 2015 that took over, or replaced the Zambia Wildlife Act of 1998. One key outcome was that it brought to the ministry the former Zambia Wildlife Authority as a department. And a lot can be said about that, but what we're looking at is to be able to be assured of sustainable wildlife management. Conservation, as well as ensuring that all stakeholder groupings play a part, and more especially that the community must play a bigger part, and not just play a bigger part, but see the benefit of conserving animals. The danger we have is that if they don't see that benefit, somebody's going to come up with a proposal that they'd like to develop a mine. And what happens, say, hey, see, people throw figures in the air, this mine will give you 6,000 jobs, even when the person knows that it won't be more than 600. But then that fire burns and goes wild in the area to say, we have 6,000 jobs. Come on, what do we need these animals for? They've never given us the jobs, and somebody's coming. And so it now becomes difficult to convince people to support sustainable wildlife management, as opposed to somebody that says is going to solve their problems just out there. What challenges do we have? Lots of them. And the first of all is that even amongst the various stakeholders, they are disaggregated. If I ask a question here, what is an elephant? Or I put an elephant, say elephant in the room, and the elephant shows up. And that elephant's name is Sipopiri. What is an elephant? Our good friends from the Far East see an elephant as a pair of tusks, nothing else. Our Canadian and North US friends, mostly, and a number of European friends, see that as a very nice animal to photograph, keep, and watch. You get those in the southern states who see it as a beautiful trophy, you know, and would be nice for a bar or some place. You get the villager who sees it as 5 tons of meat. And when the person that sees that as a pair of tusks connives with the one who sees 5 tons of meat, and then they decide to form a partnership, that becomes a problem. Hence the poaching that we seem to be grappling with all the time. It's not just that. If we're looking at then the worry about bushmeat trade, what drives it? You know, one is that there's this culture of ownership that, you know, these animals are here, so they must be eaten anyway. And we get that quite often when we have traditional ceremonies, and they said some animals have to be given, and people come with all sorts of numbers. We add up the numbers that they ask for. They're probably 5 to 6 times the number on quota. Long ago, we used to have at the most 15 traditional ceremonies, and now have over 100. And that quota isn't increasing because the animal population isn't increasing at that sort of rate. So we cannot increase just because the number of ceremonies has increased. So what do? We actually then make the allocations smaller. So eventually we'll get to a time when there'll be so many ceremonies that probably will say, okay, let's put the mice on quota as well, so that somebody has to get a license to hunt a mouse because there won't be enough to go around. There are the social issues that also come up with eating game meat, where people think that when they are having game meat, it's a social status, means they've really hit, they're at the top of the pyramid. And it must show when somebody comes home to say, oh yeah, no, we're eating impala today. And that is one driver. There's the major issue, which is poverty. People have to raise money to take children to school. And that can only be combated when they start getting not just a social benefit, you know, in terms of group benefit, but individual benefit out of conserving wildlife. So I would say that for now, the ministry is putting up secondary legislation which will then buttress everything that is in primary legislation. I would say that my appeal to all of us here is to get to understand more deeply and assist the government. 231,000 square kilometers, even if we deployed our whole army and Air Force, National Service, police and all that, you can't police that kind of land area effectively. So it means that we need more of community involvement. We need a lot more of support that we get in terms of training, and in terms of more modern equipment that's going to help in looking after these protected areas. I thank you.
This is where we've come to the end of this week's edition of Your Platform, where we've been looking at wildlife conservation in Zambia. On behalf of my producer, Penny Fanyirenda, I've been your presenter, Macpherson Mukuka. Be sure to join us next week for yet another exciting program of Your Platform. God bless you.